The whips have agreed that paragraph 1 or report number 1 dealing with the council's decision-making process will be taken as the next business. As this paragraph is part of the items for decision of the paper, I will now move receptions of that report and paragraph 1. There is an amendment to the recommendation in the paragraph that has been circulated in the chamber. Can I ask Councillors Carpenter and Daly to formally move and second their amendment?
Councillor Carpenter.
Formally seconded.
Thank you, councillors. Now we move on to the debate. Could I ask Councillor Mrs McDermott for her?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The recommendation we're debating tonight is a very sensible approach to streamlining democratic process and the decisions. Already, I think I can probably hear the opposition cry, democracy slashed in Wandsworth, but it definitely won't be. Residents in the borough will have just as much say in what is being decided as now, and probably more. Councillor Locker and I were asked by the leader to look into the Wandsworth decision-making process back in March last year. It's been a very thorough and a bottom-up approach. And right from the start, we've involved members and the cabinet members fully in the system. We held a series of brainstorming sessions with no holds barred on what could be discussed under the heading, what can we do better with the democratic process and the way decisions are made in Wandsworth? And the discussions boiled down to 3 key areas. Firstly, how many meetings should we have in a year? Moving away from a cycle of 6 council meetings is not a new trend. Already, Barnet, Hammersmith and Fulham, Kensington, Chelsea, Westminster and Merton have 5 or less council meetings a year. Most of these councils, perhaps not all of them, can still be held up as paragons of efficiency who listen to their constituents and don't shirk on democracy. And here we have Labour suggesting we stick to 6 council meetings and merely reducing the OSCs to 5 cycles a year. We nearly always have some sort of election in the spring when the April meetings have to be shelved. So 5 meetings a year would be no different from now, and no savings would be made. In the 8 years I've been councillor, I don't think, apart from this last year in 2013, there's been an election every year. And that pattern of the early elections looks likely to continue. So moving to 5 is going to make no difference at all. In the interest of democracy, obviously the big thing is the opportunity for members to scrutinise decisions. And I know from our research, we found out that some councils, such as Hackney, most decisions go straight to the executive. But here in Wandsworth, all the decisions go through the scrutiny committees before submission to the executive. And that definitely shouldn't change. It's a fundamental tenet of democracy. Of course, with fewer council meetings in the town hall, we may have to think of other creative and innovative ways to encourage citizens to participate in the development and creation of our local laws. To be honest, the number of residents who actually turn up to watch council meetings, I know there are a few here tonight, or even access video clips of debates is very variable. On occasion, finance and planning will have a good turnout because that's when it will attract delegations, for example, but numbers are very small for other meetings. So it's not going to make a huge difference to the residents of Wandsworth if we move to 4 cycles in the year. I can't imagine Labour's idea of turning one of the current council meetings into a state of the borough debate will do anything for democracy. I'm sure it will just be another platform for plenty of pontification from the opposition. Rather, democracy should be upheld by continuing to go out of the town hall, go out to the residents. We'll continue things like webcasts with the leader, let's talk sessions, surgeries, attending SNT meetings, surveys and consultations. Those all give residents a chance to be heard and have a say in the way Wandsworth is run. And of course, the ultimate democracy is the ballot box on the 22nd of May. So the second big issue we discussed was, do we have too much stuff to read in committee meetings, taking us away from those crucial decision papers? Information-only papers are a mixed blessing. Of course, they're interesting, allow us to have an insight into borough issues, but they also can take our eye off the more important decision papers and slow some meetings to the pace of a snail. A minute detail often found in some of the information papers can be very interesting, possibly as a lifeblood of some of our colleagues, but it doesn't always sit very comfortably with our strategic role of looking at the big picture. So the presumption that information-only papers will not appear on OSC committee agendas unless specifically requested is entirely sensible. And then thirdly, should we modernise the way we access information? I wonder how many of us here in this chamber actually use tablets. I'm sure most of us do. If we access our emails and we browse the web on tablets, why can't we use them for council meetings? The presumption must definitely be in favour of access online, especially as we're going to make a whopping 50k saving on the back of it. There are still some of us, some
Councillor,
of the colleagues who
can you wind up?
Just coming to sort of environmentally unfriendly paper, etc. And it is slightly Victorian having papers delivered every week to our door. Milk, okay, but why should we have council papers delivered to the door? So with the help of our officers, I'm sure we'll all be au fait with the ModGov app very soon. And I definitely support the recommendation, but not the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, I'd just like to say I agree with the last part of Councillor McDermott's speech over there. And I do think it's laughable to suggest that everybody on the opposite side of the chamber is on board with this, because I know for a fact they're not. And it was our idea to go to tablets that we suggested to Govinda and Jacob about 6 months ago, and they said, oh, we'll never get that past our back benches, you know, and here we are. So anyway, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor.
No, we weren't invited to your workshops. We weren't invited to any of that.
Personal explanation.
Councillor Daly.
Councillor Daly, seeing as you know for a fact how we all feel about tablets, I wonder if you could tell me how I feel.
No interest. So, anyway, Madam Mayor, when the leader and chief whip of the majority party first contacted us about reforming the council's democratic processes last year, I was actually encouraged. I had concerns about their initial suggestions to reduce the number of committee cycles and cut the number of papers coming to committee, but I hope this might be the start of a process that would see us genuinely reform our local democracy for the better. Sadly, over the next few weeks, it became clear that the majority party had very little intention of considering true reform. Instead, they were simply looking to save a few pennies by watering down the existing weak system, making it easier for the executive to make ever more decisions without ever needing to seek the approval of full council or a committee. Even before these reforms, Wandsworth's unique style of democracy was weak compared to many other councils around the country. Rather than having a committee structure that provides a true check and balance to the power that lies in the executive, we have overview and view scrutiny committees that are rarely any more than a rubber stamp for the business that passes through them. In Parliament, and indeed other councils...
Councillor Daly, will you step aside for a second?
Sure.
Are you aware that the committee structures that used to exist on this council were abolished compulsorily by the Labour Party under the Blair government? So actually it's the fault of the Labour Party the reason we've got our existing structures.
Thank you. We did have a choice about how we reformed it. In Parliament and indeed other councils, committees are independently chaired, some by minority party members, and are free of all cabinet involvement. In Wandsworth, our cabinet members sit alongside their committee chairs, intimidating their members into complying with the executive line.
A point of personal explanation. Point of personal... Go on, make it. Point of personal explanation. As a point of personal explanation, as the chairman of a committee, I would like to confirm that my cabinet member has never even dreamt of intimidating me.
Madam Mayor, my OSC chairman wouldn't even dream of suggesting it.
Councillor Tom. Councillor Tom, you're speaking. Oh, sorry, Councillor Daly, have you completed? Oh, I thought he said that.
I think that the majority party protests too much. Furthermore, the full council plays almost no role in the democratic process. By the time most papers arrive here, they've already been signed off by the executive and are merely being passed to us for information. This was a chance to take a genuine look at how we could strengthen the power of councillors or scrutinise council business, one of the key tasks that the public elect us to do on their behalf. Instead, we've simply watered down an already weak system in pursuit of saving a few pounds. A reduction in the number of committee cycles from 6 to 4 will mean that committee meetings are at a greater risk of being overloaded. By the time the clock hits 10 o'clock, committee chairs are incessantly checking their watches and hurrying along the agenda to ensure they can make it to the pub. To ensure they can make it to the pub in time for last orders.
I think the message is received. Councillors, do sit down. Councillor Daly, you're causing an absolute stir.
Frequently, important items do not get the attention they are due. Surely more, not less frequent meetings, which give more time to scrutinise and debate the key issues, will be much better for our democracy. What I personally find most offensive about these changes is that while we're told that this is yet another cut that we must reluctantly accept in the face of ever-stretched budgets, there are certain elements of our expenditure on democracy that have been ring-fenced and remain untouched. While the number of committee meetings and committee papers are being reduced by a third, there has been no suggestion of reducing the special allowances of chairs and their deputies by a similar amount. Wandsworth pays out more in special responsibility allowances than most councils in London, almost £430,000 a year, compared to around £370 in Westminster, £323 in Hammersmith, £178 in Richmond and £172 in Merton. If the minority party are ever so bold as to mention to this, we are immediately threatened with the prospect of our 3 special responsibility allowances being abolished altogether. The clearest indication that the majority has no interest in negotiating with us when it comes to deciding how to build a fair democratic system. And this is all on the camera. You can decide whether you think you're in touch with reality. And we'll see what the public think. Just as Councillor Govinda has shown, he would rather cut frontline services than senior officer pay. We now see he'd rather water down the democratic process than find savings from the councillor gravy train. In summary, Madam Mayor, I believe these changes do a disservice to the residents of Wandsworth who elected us.
Councillor Daly,
I think I've been... Sorry.
The leader would like...
The leader,
would you give way, please?
I never said... I said that the savings we made were 29 million that you voted against. I cannot believe that council officers earned 29 million.
Sorry,
Councillor
I want
Daly.
a point of explanation on this fact, actually, because I'm sick of the Tories telling us again and again that we voted against £29 million of cuts. They know, sorry, you listen. It's absolute rubbish, and you know, if you were running this council, you vote against papers and you would have done it differently. We voted against dual cuts because they were the wrong cuts to make. Of course we would have balanced the books. Of course we would have balanced the books. We would have made £29 million of cuts. We just wouldn't have made £29 million of cuts that you made. We wouldn't have made the ones that hit frontline services and protected the pockets of the senior executives. That is what you did.
Councillors,
that is there for everybody to see.
Councillors!
Right. Now let me
Councillor
finish.
Daly, finish.
In summary, Madam Mayor, I believe these changes do a disservice to the residents of Wandsworth who elected us. They are a missed opportunity to reconsider how we really give value for money to our local residents through the democratic process. I not only commend our amendment to members, but I call on the leader to come back to the council after the elections, if indeed he is still leader of this council at that time, with a more radical reinvention of this council's processes so that each of us can truly serve our constituents as they expect us to.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tom. Councillor Tom. I'm actually calling Councillor Tom for this decision-making process. Thank you, Councillor.
Good evening. Madam Mayor,